My name is Jeremy Walton, and here's a simple setup for YouTube videos. Let's go! The weather's been weird lately, but this might be the last time I get to wear a beanie. It's a sad day when that happens. I love beanies and it hides the mess of hair that's underneath here. I need a haircut, but there's no way I'm gonna cut it myself. All right, enough of that. It's actually late. I decided to do this video last minute because why not? So I'm going to enjoy a drink while I do it. By the way, I make a killer Moscow Mule. If you want a simple setup for YouTube, that's going to involve your camera, sound, and lighting. If you nail these three things, you'll be on your way to a successful video that comes across as professional. You don't have to overcomplicate things. Basic techniques with a few tricks is all you need. Just nailing exposure and having clean audio will put you miles ahead of other people. So from this video, take what you learn and use as much or as little as you need for your setup. Let's jump right in with camera settings. There's a lot of cameras out there and I can't cover them all, but I can still give you the basics to get started. Yes, as a filmmaker, you can't rely on being told what to do 100% of the time. You'll have to do tests and make your own decisions. If you only remember one thing from this video, remember that. I shoot in 4K. I shoot 24 frames per second. If you want to shoot 30, your decision. My shutter is double the frame rate and I'm shooting at an f2.8. For me, that's my sweet spot. Shooting in here, my office, or in my car, I'm always at a 2.8. Holding for a plane. For a setup like this, I'm also using a 17.5mm lens, and with the GH5S and its 1.8 times crop, we're looking at a 31.5. To complement all that, I also shoot in Vlog. Now there's so much debate when it comes to vlog. A lot of people like to shoot in specific profiles to either limit the amount of time in post when it comes to color correction, or they like the look of a custom profile. For me, it's Vlog 100% of the time. It works for me and my workflow. I recommend it, but depending on your needs, it may not work for you. That's it for camera settings. There's nothing too special. Every camera will have its own unique advantages or disadvantages, but these camera settings can really be applied to any camera you're using. Next, we need to cover the audio setup. I'm sure you're wanting to get to the lighting. I promise I'll get to it. There's a reason I want to discuss audio first. I like to be as efficient as possible. Let's say you spent a lot of time setting up your lights and it looks great. Then you need to throw in a C-stand and a boom pole and realize there's no room to do it. You'll have to start moving lights. A lot of time wasted. Another obstacle you might face is your boom pole causing an unwanted shadow. Again, you'll have to start tweaking and moving lights. Just set up your audio first to eliminate all of that. As for the mic, there's tons of options depending on your budget. I wouldn't get too hung up on buying the most expensive mic, depending on what you're delivering to. For example, YouTube versus client work. There's a few other things you can do to get better audio with inexpensive or cheaper mics. I've actually been using the Sennheiser ME64 for a while now. Not the cheapest, not the most expensive, but understanding basic audio can give you great results. Treating your environment will be the first thing you need to do. Let's discuss the cheaper ways that can help. Let me introduce you to the sound blanket. Okay, this isn't a sound blanket, it's a moving blanket that has been used as a sound blanket many times. It's definitely cheaper. If you're a filmmaker, you need these in general. Throw it over some furniture for protection, pad your car when loading equipment. It can even block light from a window or hang it on a wall to not only help with sound, but because it's black, you can use it as a negative fill. White walls will bounce light, so these are a must. You can even get a grommet kit to make it easier to hang on the wall. Okay, enough of this. Yeah. Now we're holding for a helicopter. Another option is sound panels. Not too long ago, Becky and Chris, check out their YouTube channel, did a video on building your own sound panels, which shows you if there's a will, there's a way. You don't always have to spend a lot of money to get good results. If you watch their video, there is one really important thing that stood out, and it's what I do for my videos. Getting your mic as close as possible to your subject will make the biggest difference. My mic is right here, just slightly out of frame, and in my office, it's even closer. This room can get a bit echoey. Bare walls and hardwood floors, not the best combination, but I actually don't have any kind of sound treatment in this room. That's not always the case for every room. I'm just able to get away with it. Do a couple tests with your mic placement first. Then move on if you need to sound treat your walls. Try throwing some moving blankets on the floor. You never know what will work unless you give it a try. Okay, we got the first two out of the way. Now it's time to talk about the lighting setup. I didn't want to make lighting a difficult or complicated thing. Lighting can be fun and what can really make your videos stand out. Unless you mess up the first two things. Good lighting won't help really bad audio. What you need to do is evaluate the space you're shooting in. I like my office setup because I'm close to the camera, but there's depth. If you have the space, that's a good choice. Although when I'm trying to show a product, being close to the camera isn't the best. That's the reason I made a second space to shoot in, where I have some room to breathe. Now I could pull away from the wall behind me a bit more, but there's two reasons I decided not to. One is, I wanted to show off my maps. I'm kind of obsessed with maps and love these two pieces made by Street Carvings. They are laser cut and look great. The one to my right is downtown LA and the other is Minneapolis, two cities that I love. If you have a blank wall, you may want to think about how to break that up. The other reason is, if I want to keep this as a simple setup, my key light needs to light me and the background. If I was further away, I would need an additional light to throw in so the background would be exposed properly and not fall into complete darkness. So let's talk about the key light and how I made that work. I'm using an Aperture 120D, a pretty common light among filmmakers if you watch any YouTube videos. Right now, because of the Mark II, you might be able to get something used at a decent price. If that's too expensive, any light you have can work with some tweaks. Just apply the same principles I'll talk about, just like with the camera settings and audio setup. The Aperture light is known for its light dome, basically making a softbox. It's just a simple and easy way to diffuse the light. That's not a new thing, it's just convenient not having to rig up additional equipment. Soft light is pleasing to the eye, and it's not going to cast harsh shadows all over your background. My key light is pretty close, just a little past in arm's reach. Any closer and it would start creeping into the frame. When setting up your lights and environment, something you may want to consider is the color of your background, clothing, and skin tone. Does that sound weird? Let me give you an example. Right now I'm wearing a dark colored shirt. Let me go throw on a light colored shirt. Look how much of a difference this makes. It's definitely getting to the point of being the brightest thing in the frame. This is a really good example of, hold on, let me go change back. That's better. This is a good example when considering wall color, wardrobe, and lighting for different skin tones. If you don't have a lot of light, maybe don't paint your walls black or wear brighter shirts. Just something to consider. As for my skin tone, it's pretty light, so I really like a soft diffuse light. The light dome just doesn't cut it for me. What I use in addition to the light dome is something that can be very inexpensive. It's called bleached muslin, and you can buy this at any fabric store. Since buying the fabric is cheap, I can just cut the circle out and clip it to the front of the light dome. Not exactly how I would like this setup to be, but you gotta figure out other ways when you work in a limited space. You don't always have the option for the most ideal setup. Although this will drastically reduce your light output. With just the light dome, for proper exposure, I would have it set to around 25%. With the bleached muslin, it's cranked up to 100%. Just something to keep in mind. The spill from the light will also fall onto the background, which is where I want it. You can actually see right here on the map, there's a little hot spot. It's actually the brightest part of the entire frame because the coating on the map isn't completely a matte finish. I'm fine with that though. I don't like things to be completely perfect. We all know that's not how life is. Am I right? So that's my key light, and if this frame was smaller, that might be all you need. A one light setup is totally possible. This frame is bigger though, and I have a second map in the background that needed some help. I added a second light, which is from Lightgear. I love these lights, and everyone I've dealt with over at Lightgear has been wonderful. They're based in Burbank, and their lights have been used in all kinds of movies. Let's just say these are the lights you'd see being used in a Hollywood production. I have a handful of their lights, but for this I'm using their LightMatte 1 S2. It's dimmable and bicolor, so you get tungsten to daylight and everything in between. With the accessories they sell, I have their full diffusion on with their light control grid to reduce the spill. I'm trying to increase the ambient light behind me without affecting my exposure. So it's a diffused light, but one additional step will make it that much better. I have white ceilings. Like I mentioned earlier, using the moving blankets as a negative fill, we're going to do the opposite and use my ceiling as a bounce and fill light. This took some finessing because if the light is facing the wall too much, you'll see the reflection in the map, like we had on this side, just a more extreme case. But I eventually got the right angle to bounce the light properly. With the light at 100%, the background became flat. So I just dialed it back to 70%, and there you go. So let me show you what it looks like with the light off. It just doesn't work for me. Let's turn it back on. There you go, and that's basically my lighting setup with 2 lights. But let me throw a few other things your way. Some people might get discouraged when they watch this video or similar videos on YouTube when they see expensive cameras or equipment. I discuss the equipment I use because some people really want to know. But if it's discouraging, I want you to look at it differently. Don't think aperture 120D, think a soft key light. In this room, I have a huge window to my left. Most of my filming is done at night, so I have no use for it. If you don't have any lights, is there a bright window you can take advantage of? If you do and it needs to be diffused, buy some cheap bleached muslin to hang over your window, and boom, you basically have a similar setup. To add fill, you can use the light from the window, and to my right, have a bounce. That's not expensive. Bounce some light to fill out the background. You can even paint some cardboard black to use as a flag to shape or control the spill of that light. Never let the lack of equipment discourage you. You just have to figure out a way to get the results you want within the environment you have. The only thing that matters is what's in the frame. There are benefits to high-end equipment, but if the image looks good, it doesn't matter if it's a $100 light, a $5,000 light, or a window. Remember that. Well, there you have it, a simple setup for YouTube videos. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hit that like button because there's definitely more in the way. Subscribe so you don't miss out. But until then, comment below if you have any questions about this setup. And as for this episode, it's a wrap. Sometimes with light, you gotta take the edge off. And sometimes, you gotta take the edge off.